Welcome to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. I'm your host, Trillia, and I'm so glad to be here. Today's show is taped, so although I won't be taking calls, I'll be so happy to receive an email from you. Drop me a note at livingbyfaith@moody.edu. Again, you can email me, and I would love to hear from you. livingbyfaith@moody.edu. Most churches have some sort of ministry team, whether it's children's ministry, welcome ministry, greeting, prayer, women's ministry, you name it. Ministry teams really make up the heart of most churches. So we have a lot of questions about, okay, what do we do with ministry teams? How do we lead, manage, and care for these teams? My guest, Kelly Worrell, is here to help. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me.
Um, you know, Ministry teams are the heartbeat of most churches. So here's a question that I know people would love to hear. What are some of the common problems in ministry teams?
Yeah, thanks so much, Julia. There are so many struggles that we have when we work with a team of people in the church context and in other contexts. Even our families function in many ways as a team, but working with other people toward a common goal is not always easy because we are human, and so there are a lot of hurdles along the way. Some of the most common hurdles that I've seen as I work in different church environments and even at Moody Bible Institute are just when a team doesn't have clear direction or a clear goal,
Yeah, yeah.
or maybe team members have competing goals. They don't align or they have different ideas of the direction that they are supposed to head. Another common goal, I see this even among my students at Moody, is when team members don't pull their weight.
Ah,
Some team members kind of withdraw or don't meet their deadlines and different things. And perhaps there are just a few team members who have to step up and fill that. And then resentment can seep in and different things. Um, and then just the interpersonal relationships. Sometimes
mm,
team members just don't get along. There's personality clashes. They rub each other the wrong way, or they don't know how to solve their conflicts quickly. And so then they can grow and become, even more deeper resentment and bitterness.
mm.
And sadly, uh, difficulties on teams is one of the biggest reasons why people leave a ministry or even leave a church. And so I think it's a topic that ought to be discussed more. And we could also do well to provide just more training for our people and how to do this well.
Absolutely. You shared a lot of things just now, and each one of them could be their own show, probably. When,
Yeah, probably.
yeah, I thought of the first two, even just clarity, clear vision and direction. I think we think a lot
Yeah,
about that with business, but we don't
yeah,
think about that with ministry teams. But wow, I have seen it go poorly because there isn't a clear vision. And I think because there isn't a clear vision or direction, you get into that second thing. You have competing goals. Because if you don't know what the direction, what is the direction for the church? What is the direction for the pastor? What is it that he wants? You're going to have members who are thinking, well, this is most important or that is most important. So the first question I have is how do you get that clear direction, and why is it an okay thing for ministry to be thinking this way?
yeah. Thank you. That's so good, and that could be its own show. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in strategic planning for a purpose and really taking the time to lay out the plan for the ministry, whether that is a plan for the whole church to really do some strategic planning or an individual ministry. And that process can be expanded or kind of contracted to the size that fits the ministry and what's appropriate for that ministry. But it should include things like getting very clear on the ministry's vision. That vision being like what is true about the world because this ministry exists, right? What do we want to be true? What is our vision for the impact that we're going to make? And then following on that is a mission statement. What are we going to do to get there, to move toward that vision? And then other parts of a good sort of strategic planning process would be just really assessing the needs of the people we're trying to reach, really understanding those people. What do they need? What do they want? What are they interested in? How can we, and then assessing who we are and our resources and how we can meet those needs in a unique way that God has called us to. And then kind of from there, once we understand, our mission and the people we're trying to reach and the resources that we have, then we can start to really prioritize what are we going to focus on as a ministry? What are our priorities and how are we going to get there? What are the initiatives that we're going to put into place to reach those goals? And so having those things in place and then making sure that our team understands where we're heading and having everybody on board and unified around that plan can really help us then build a team that can get there and can do that work together.
So w- when 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 we're thinking about leadership and leadership teams and in ministry, um, I do wonder for most of our listening audience and for most of us who or we there will be the pastor who really makes that
Yeah.
clear vision. So how would say a women's ministry leader who has a question about a direction or a question about how would you encourage her to talk to the pastor or maybe it's an executive pastor who
Hmm.
how would you encourage her to share those ideas and thoughts because I have also witnessed some tension there when there's that you
Mm,
we want to be and we should be submitted to our leadership. However, there are
yeah.
ideas and there's questions and maybe there's fear. How would you encourage that person to approach their leadership and discuss maybe different ideas?
Yeah, I think this has to start with the pastor or the elder board or whatever that leadership structure is in the church, and hopefully they have a clear a clear plan and clear leadership in place, clear strategic planning in place for the church as a whole, and then that should be communicated to their ministry leaders, and so that this is all unified, right? So my if I'm leading the women's ministry, I'm not going off and doing my own thing, but the planning that I'm doing for my ministry and the vision I'm casting should be in concert with the vision for the whole church. So if that communication is strong and there's unity around those visions, that's the ideal, right? That's what we're working toward. So I would hope that that communication, those lines of communication, would be open, and that the pastoral staff, the executive pastor, the lead pastor, whoever my women's ministry leader, for example, is reporting to, that she would be able to uh, both receive the vision from the church as a whole
Yeah.
and be working with that in building her own unique vision for her particular ministry, whether that's a children's ministry or the women's ministry and so on, the worship ministry, right? These things need to be working in concert to be most effective.
You mentioned something that I think would be important to bring up and really shine a light on. I have heard of different women's ministries that are almost like little small churches. So you've got
Hmm.
yeah, you've got the church and going in one direction and the women's ministry going in another. And you
Yeah.
said, and I believe this is really important, we should be in line with what the church's mission is. And so we can still have ideas but if it's almost like if I work for Moody Publishers and one of the things that we don't publish a lot of is the I mean, I'm trying to think of something we don't publish a lot of coloring books. So if we decided that we are going to now focus all of our attention on coloring books, if as a organization, but then I'm like, nope, nope, nope. We've got to do something else, and I'm pushing that. That wouldn't be in line with what we've decided as an organization. And so how would you encourage that woman to take her how would you encourage or correct her as she is trying to think through how to lead her ministry well?
Yeah, I think communication is so key to all of this, right? I think, and that has to start from, again, the pastor and the elder board. They need to be clearly communicating with their staff, whether that's paid staff, full-time staff, or volunteer staff, that their vision, and that needs to be done prayerfully, as they're casting the vision for the church and where are we heading, what are we prioritizing, what is our mission. That needs to be clearly communicated to their ministry leaders, and the ministry leaders, they ought to be in line with that, right? So if I have a vision for my ministry that is in contradiction to the vision for the church, that would need to be addressed and worked through. We'd have to prayerfully see where we can come together. Is there an opportunity here for collaboration? And do things need to change? Hopefully there would be listening and receiving on both sides of that conversation. If the ministry of the church as a whole ought to be adjusted, for example, because God's put something on the heart of the women's ministry leader. And so I would hope those conversations would be open and mutual, if vision and strategy needs to be adjusted. But they have to be working in concert.
100%. And that would be the same for a publishing house or anything. You would want
Yeah.
to hear from your team and see, okay, well, maybe we can change a strategy, or maybe there needs to be some updates here. And that, I think, is key. Communication
Yeah.
rather than growing bitter or demanding your own way, communicating humbly. And you also need to be, as people who are leaders, whether you're a pastor or you're elder board, or you need to be people who are willing to listen. I think that is exactly the right approach, so that we can share the gospel, spread the gospel, let Jesus be known, because that's ultimately what I believe, or I hope, the heart of ministry really truly is. More on Living by Faith when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. I'm talking with Kelly Worrell. She is the chair of the Music and Media Arts field and a professor of communications at Moody Bible Institute. She is the author of several books, including Pierced and Embraced. Kelly is a member of the writing team for Moody's daily devotional, Today in the World, in the Word. Today in the Word. That the world made me laugh. Today in the Word. And we love Today in the Word here at Living by Faith. And we're so glad that we've been talking about ministry and how to really effectively lead a ministry. And we want to lead well. We want to care well for our people, we want to care well for our ministry leaders. But how do we do this? How do we do this? And we've we've talked about some common problems, and we started with clear direction and also competing goals, because I would say those 2 points that you brought up are, I would imagine, the leading common problems. But what is true of an effective team? What do you think makes a team effective?
Yeah, an effective team. Well, it's a lot of it's the converse, the opposite of what I said, are some of the common problems. So I think an effective team does have that clear goal and that common goal. We're all unified around that goal and all pulling in the same direction. But also the relationships. I think in a really effective team, every team member feels valued and accepted, that they feel like they are a part of the team and that they have a voice, and that voice is valued. And I think every team member takes ownership, right? Every team member should have that sense that this is my team, and if I don't show up, the team is missing something important, something significant. I think in an effective team, every team member knows their role. They're really clear on what is theirs and
Mhm.
what is not theirs. And they feel empowered to perform their role and to do it to the best of their ability. They are resourced well to do that role. Uh, and I think every effective team, they just enjoy being together, right? They like one another and
Mhm.
they have fun together. They look forward to being together, and and they have strong communication. That'll be the last one I mentioned. They have strong communication that then builds a sense of trust in one another, a sense of safety. So those are some of my top qualities of an effective team.
A lot of it is related to encouragement or communication, that is. You because,
Yeah.
so much of what you expressed, it would need to be communicated well, communicated clearly and effectively. I don't know who said this, but it is often said that clarity is kindness. And I have seen
Mhm.
that in my own life, both personally with my family, but also in the work that I do. When you're clear on your expectations, clear on your goals and your standards and anything that I mean, it really helps. It helps to build the team up, clear on your resources and your lack of resources, what you can't, because that
Mhm.
really, yes, it really helps you know, okay, this I can do and this I cannot do because we don't have the people or the resources or whatever it is. And as a church, when you're thinking of ministries, that clarity, especially on that resources, helps. It helps you because I can imagine for a ministry team, um, resources and what you do and don't have. It matters on what you can and cannot do. Have you seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. And resources, there's many aspects to those resources, right? There's the people resources. Who do we have available? What staff members, are able to contribute to this ministry, and how much time are they able to contribute? So many of our church staff members, they're wearing multiple hats. And so we may be expecting X, Y, and Z out of this person, not knowing that this other ministry also requires their time and attention. So, getting very clear on which staff members are able to support this ministry and with how many hours, right? Getting that specific on, okay, the church administrative assistant, she can give this ministry 5 hours a week. And so we ought not expect 20 hours a week out of
Right.
him or her. And so staff, and then also volunteers, of course. Like what resources do we have in the way of volunteers? What's realistic? We may plan a VBS program and it may be an amazing plan, but it may require 50 volunteers. And we have to really assess, is that realistic of our church body right now? And do we need to adjust our plans, get more clear and specific? So the people, the human resources is important. And then, of course, the money, the financial resources is another aspect. How much can we budget toward this program or this initiative and this ministry? And what's realistic there with the finances? And space is another resource. I think a lot of
Yes.
our churches are, they're expecting a building and to do a lot for them. And again, you may have competing interests in even just the space that we have. Multiple ministries may be vying for the same room or the same space. And so, yeah, talking, communicating across ministries and being really well coordinated in that communication is so important.
Kelly, this is so good. I feel like well, I was just thinking, I was like, wow, every ministry needs to hear this because I think that
Yeah.
one of the things that we forget is that resources does not mean money. It does mean
Yeah,
money, but it means so much more. And so
it
if you don't
does.
yes, if you don't have the people, if you don't have the space, if you don't have
Yeah.
the wherewithal. I mean, it because you it the endurance because you can have a plan, but you got to see it through. And there's so much,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so much about what you're sharing that I think, wow, this could really help a lot of ministries, especially if you've got someone who's a visionary, who has all the ideas in the world and can can really that they think big, but they don't think about the people part. I just love that you used Vacation
Yeah.
Bible School as an example because you can
Hmm.
have someone who has this beautiful plan to meet this community and God can do miracle after miracle. But if
Yep.
you attend a church that maybe has a small staff or small membership, or it's big membership but it's really hard to get people to get involved, or there's no telling what it is. There's gonna there's gonna need to be a bit of a, okay, what can we actually do? I hate to
Hmm.
use the word reality check when we're talking about the Lord, but but I think
Yeah.
he deals with order as well, right? So the
Right.
reality, yeah,
Right.
yeah. So the reality is that you may have to adjust your plans, not completely kill your
Yeah.
plans. Sometimes we do, but adjust them. And I think that's so
Yeah.
wise. It's so wise to
Hmm.
be thinking like this. And we haven't asked this question, but I as I was listening to you and thinking about your bio, I can't help but
Hmm.
wonder what made you want to talk about or think through ministry leadership. What is it? Are you Yeah? Is it something about your day to day work? Are you in ministry
Hmm.
leadership? Yeah. What
Hmm.
drew you to this topic?
Yeah, thank you. So I come at it from multiple areas. It touches a couple different areas in my life. So I teach at Moody Bible Institute in the communications program. And so one of the classes I teach is our Gen Ed speech communication class. And we do a unit on small group communication or teams communication. And I'm so passionate about it. I love teaching my students that unit because I tell them you are going to be living and working in a team capacity for the rest of your life. Uh, whether that is on a church, many of our students are training to go into ministry in different capacities. So that could be a church team. Many of them will be pastors or ministry leaders. They might work for a nonprofit organization and be a part of a team there. Some of them will be teachers and working on a teaching staff. They might be on the mission field working with a group of missionaries.
Mhm.
So they will be serving in a team capacity for the rest of their lives. And even our families, like I said at the top of the show, our families function in many ways as a team. So many of these principles, when we talk about how to communicate well as a team and make decisions as a team and so on, it happens in family life too. So I love teaching that unit. I lead a team of students. It's called the Literary Practicum Team, and we produce our yearbook at Moody and a journal, art and theology journal called Thin Space. And so I lead that group of 10 students every year,
Mhm.
and it gives us an opportunity to really practice these things. I love working with them, and they are student led, and I advise. And so I love having the opportunity to walk alongside them as they're working these things out and learning how to put into practice much of what we've been talking about. And then I also, as the field chair of music and media arts at Moody, I lead a team of faculty. We have 15
Right.
faculty members in our field, and so have the opportunity to work with them and we live these things out sometimes really well. Other times we have struggles too.
Yeah.
And then I've been in ministry at my churches, different churches over the years in different capacities too. So, it touches every area of our lives, I think, for most of us, different
It
ways.
it really does, and I love hearing, how you have used this in classroom settings, but also ministry and leadership in your work, and it I I also love the idea of applying this to the family. Because I
Hmm.
do think that I think sometimes we separate. This is kind of that classic faith and work separation. But who is it that says that? every square inch. Oh, I know his name. I'm gonna look it up, and when we come back from the break, I will have his name ready. But
Mhm.
there really isn't a separation. All work is work, and helping us understand how to manage our homes, I think is it's really unique and important because I do think that sometimes,
Mhm.
yeah, I think we aren't going to think of our homes as okay. This is also um, not just a living space, but it is our ministry in many ways. And
Yeah.
yeah, and we need all the help in the world to communicate well. I have been talking with Kelly Warhol. She is the chair of the Music and Media Arts field and a professor of communications at Moody Bible Institute. We have been talking I mean, I just think I'm going to come back and listen to this over and over again. And I think you will want to too. More on Living by Faith when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. I am talking with Kelly Warhol, and we're talking about management. We are talking about ministry. We're talking about caring well. And before the break, I shared a quote, but I didn't share the full quote because I couldn't find it, but I have it now and I want to read it to you because I believe it applies to what we're talking about right now. Abraham Kuyper, he wrote, there is not a square inch in the whole domain of human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. And so every square inch it's a phrase that is rooted in his theology, and it asserts that Christ is sovereign over all aspects of life, culture, and creation with no secular sacred divide. And we were talking about how so often we take ideas about work and we only apply them to, say, like a 9 to 5 job. We don't necessarily apply them even maybe to ministry sometimes, and definitely not to our homes. And I thought, wait a minute, all of what we've been talking about, and Kelly also said, it applies to so many aspects of our life. And it reminded me of this quote. So I encourage you to look him up and learn more about his work. As a matter of fact, so many of our faith and work ministries kind of lean on him as a for direction in theology. So Kelly, we have been talking about a lot about effective teams and common problems. So what does scripture
Mm.
say about serving in teams? And it kind of this pairs very well with the quote I just shared.
It does perfectly. So much in scripture about working in teams, even though it might not use that specific word. I think it goes all the way back to Genesis, as much of our theology does. And the Garden of Eden, even when God created Adam and puts Adam in the garden to work, and Adam is naming the animals, of course. And the one thing that is not good is that Adam has no helper. And so it's not good that man should be alone. And so God creates Eve and puts them in the garden together to work together, to complement one another, and to cultivate the garden together. And so I think it goes all the way back there, right? We are not created to live and worship and work in isolation. And even though that is our inclination sometimes, if you want it done right, just do it yourself. Is is the mantra sometimes that we use. But God created us to work alongside one another, and then we see so many examples of this throughout Scripture. I think another one that I love is the lengthy description of the building of the tabernacle in Exodus, chapters 31 to 38. I think it might be, and we just have these detailed descriptions of the different craftsmen and the specific skills that they bring to that work, right? No one of them could have accomplished that enormous task on their
Mm.
own. And so I think that's just a beautiful early picture, Old Testament picture of working together. And then similarly in First Kings, when there's the building of the temple and Solomon's palace, and there's thousands of workers that come together to make that happen. In Nehemiah, the building of the wall, and it talks about each family or each guild repairing their section. They know exactly what they're responsible for, and they do that work, and then together they accomplish this project, which is so much bigger than any one of them could have done on their own.
Mm.
And then in the New Testament, I love the fact that Jesus, even Jesus, did not serve in isolation. Even
Right.
the Son of God did not say, I've got this. I don't need anybody else. Even though, as God, didn't necessarily need others, but he gathered his disciples around him. He had his own team, right? His own team of partners in ministry. And they were from differing backgrounds and they had different personalities that come through in the Gospels. And so he worked them. And then, of course, probably the most obvious description is just with the body of Christ and the spiritual gifting that the Spirit gives, and for the use, for the building up of the body. And so, yeah, I think we see these principles played out in so many ways throughout Scripture.
Absolutely. One of the things that is amazing to me that you mentioned is that Jesus chose to have disciples,
Yeah.
chose to have friends. Um, it
Hmm.
he had a family. These are the things that are pretty remarkable to me, and that we see this example of needing a community of people, needing others, um, and so let's speak to that specifically for maybe the person. There are I can know even in my own heart, where there can be a temptation to self-sufficiency, or a temptation to, I'll just do it all myself. um, so
Yeah.
how do you encourage someone? No, no, no. You need to ask for help, or you need to include the team, because we do want to have a team mindset, especially I believe in ministry.
Yeah, I think it's another way of loving our neighbor, of
Mm.
loving one another, is to include others in the mission, in the ministry, in the calling. It's another way to lift them up, to encourage them. It's another way to build that community that you're talking about. We were created for communion. Another scriptural, biblical, theological point we didn't mention is just the Trinity, and that
Yes.
communion that the Trinity has. And so we were created in the image of a triune God for community and for connection and communion. And so as we minister with one another, it's a way to live that out and to yeah, to love one another as we love ourselves, is to lift them up, right? And if we, that mindset of, if I want it done right, I'll just do it myself. And I admit I can be inclined toward that. Um, and also I get it in my head that I don't want to bother other people, so I'll just
Yes.
do it.
Yeah.
And but it's kind of the flip side, that same prideful sense. I think it's
Yes.
still a sin, even though in my mind I convince myself, oh, I don't want to bother anybody, I'll do it. Um, so I think I'm serving them when in reality I'm not, right? It's
Mhm.
probably more loving to come alongside of them and to welcome them into that ministry that we can partner in together. And we talked about families. The same goes with my kids. There are ways in which, oh, I'll just do it because maybe I don't like how they do it, or they don't do it like I would do it.
Yeah.
But yet welcoming them in and training them up, is a way to love them.
Absolutely. Give them the chance to make a mistake if it's gonna be a mistake, or
Yeah.
give them a chance to shine and show you.
Yeah.
I love that you frame this in with the idea, the conviction, the call to love our neighbor as ourselves.
Mm,
Because that, I think, is ultimately what we're that's what we're called to do, to love God with all our hearts,
yeah.
mind, and soul, and love our neighbors as ourselves. And it's an act of love to include people, and to,
Hmm.
yeah, allow people to shine, and to let their gifts be used and utilized,
Yeah.
and just to communicate that that you see them, you trust them, that you are willing to let them participate. I really do love that mentality, to change it
Yeah.
from, to think of think of it as an act of love and
Mhm.
service. And I I wonder if more of us could put that on, put on love and think of,
Mhm.
yes, think of our ministry participation, but also as we're leading, how we lead as an act of loving our neighbor. I think we would approach so many things differently. We would answer that email different. We would um, invite,
Yeah.
yes, invite that person into our doing, if you will, in a different manner. We would and so I again believe that this is something that not it doesn't only apply to ministry, it applies to all of life. And who doesn't want to grow in humility and love? We all do, and with God we can. More with Kelly when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillian Newbell. I am so glad to be thinking about and talking about ministry. And really, I feel like what we've a lot of what we've talked about is a heart posture. We've talked about open
Mhm.
communication, we've talked about humility and really about loving our neighbor. And I think that is what will make a lot of ministry effective. But also, let's get practical in this last segment. Um,
Mhm.
is there a clear way to develop a plan for ministry?
Yeah, there's a lot of tools I love to give to my students on kind of how to form a team, how to work with a team. We mentioned at the top of the hour, kind of talked through if I were developing a strategic plan for my ministry, some of the elements that might be included in that. But there's another tool that I love to give my students, which are the 5 stages of team building from Tuckman, a theorist called Tuckman. And so he goes through 5 stages, which I think are so helpful for any team, really any team setting. And so his first stage is the forming stage. And in the forming stage of team development, you're bringing your team together, you're recruiting them, and they are coming together. And the goal of that first forming stage is really just to get to know one another, to spend time together, to make sure that every team member feels valued as a part of this team, feels accepted, feels like they have a voice on this team, that their gifting matters, and they take ownership, right? Again, they think this is my team. And so I'm going to show up for these people. And so to start building those connections, and obviously those connections are going to deepen as we move through our work together, but that forming stage is so important. So when I do this unit in my speech communication class, I give them a whole section of a class period. Like, I don't want you to talk about your project. I don't want you to start making plans. I just want you to form. I just want you to get to know each other. And so I think a lot of teams don't spend the time doing that, or it's seen as, for those of us who might be more uh, project oriented, or we might want to get right to work and we miss this important step. But a team that knows each other, that likes each other, that has these relationships is going to work together so much better. So that's the first stage. The second stage is called storming. The stages all rhyme. And so the second stage is storming. And that's when the team kind of begins to get clear on their goal and clear on their roles. And Tuckman said this is a stage called storming because sometimes conflicts start to happen now when we get a little deeper and get beneath the surface. And so conflict can pop up. But the important thing for a team in this stage is to make sure that we are all clear on our goal, like we've been talking about, that we know what we're doing, why we're together, what our mission is, and we all agree on it. We all buy in. and we're all moving in the same direction. And then also clear on our roles. So everybody knows, like, this is what I'm responsible for. This is what I bring to the table. This is the unique gifting that I want to use to serve this team as we move toward our mission. So that's stage 2. And then stage 3 is called the norming stage. And that's where the team gets clear on sort of their rules of engagement or their
Mm.
expectations of one another. And often a team will use even a written contract, depending on how formal they want to be. But a lot of teams will use a tool like that to really spell out, here's what we expect of one another. Here is our expectation for attendance at our meetings, for example, or here's the expectation for timeliness or for meeting deadlines or whatever it is. Let's get clear on what we expect of one another, and let's all sign off on that. And so these 3 opening stages, I think again, a lot of teams skip right over them or aren't even aware that those are things they should do. They just start talking about the work right away. And the more we can lay this groundwork, the more chance we have at working together effectively. Because stage 4 is called performing. So we had forming, storming, norming, and performing. And performing is when we actually get down to the work. We start making the specific plans for how we're going to accomplish our goals and making assignments of tasks and different things and managing the work together. So that's where all the work happens in stage 4. And then stage 5 is the adjourning stage. After the project is completed or after the VBS is done, or after the ministry year for our worship team, let's take some time and reflect. Let's assess. What did we do well together? Where could we have done better? What can we learn from this? What changes do we want to make next time we do that? Such an important step in the group process that, again, often gets overlooked. But that's where the real takeaways happen and change can be affected.
I so this is a system. This is a system where
Yeah.
people, yeah, so where can people learn more about this system? Because it's Tuckman's, it means it belongs to someone, him. So where would you
hmm
encourage someone to, if they want to learn more and want to maybe adopt this into their processes, where do they go?
Yeah. I think if you just Google Tuckman's 5 stages of group process, it will come right up for you.
That's true. So there you go. I did that myself, and I see that it has there's different organizations that use it and different organizations that
hmm
teach it, and
Yeah.
so I'm sure that you can find yeah, you can find a way to implement this and learn more by other organizations who have developed it, and you spell Tuckman as Tuckman, so it's Tuckman, Tuckman,
hmm
Tuckman, and it's Tuckman's 5 stages of group development, which you can find forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And so,
Yeah. Doesn't
yep,
quite rhyme there, but
no.
yeah.
You saw my brain.
That's
I
right. It falls off on the 5th one.
It does. I was just thinking he probably pronounced it strangely just to make it, assuming it's
That's
a he.
right.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That was great. Okay, I love that. I think that's important. As we end, safety and trust are vital to healthy team culture. How do you foster that? We only have if you can answer it in about a minute or two, that's safety and trust, totally important. How do you do it?
Yeah, thank you. I think it happens in a lot of what we've been talking about. It kind of lands the plane well that, those 2 things are so important for a team to function well. And I think it is developed through much of what we've been talking about, through that clear communication, through that honesty, valuing each team member, developing a safe space where people feel heard, they feel like they have a voice, they feel like they are listened to, that their opinion matters, and that it will be considered, right? That when I bring something to the table, it will be appropriately uh, heard and listened to, and that my thoughts might even affect change. That it will
Yeah.
be uh, that I will, yeah, that I have a voice here and that I matter.
I think that's incredibly important. It is. It is important with communication to know, yes, it's a safe place for me to bring up an idea or a thought or a concern, and
Mhm.
I can be honest, and we can trust that um, each one of us has each other's best interest in mind, while also supporting the goal of the ministry or the mission and the
Mhm.
vision. And so those things are very important, and it takes time. I just want to encourage
Mhm.
anyone listening who's thinking, "Oh, wow, I feel so behind," or "I haven't done this," or our team's a mess." I think all of this takes time
Mm.
and
Yeah.
prayer. We're a living by faith, so we're
Yeah.
encouraging you to do all of this shored up in prayer and asking the Lord for help to do
Mhm.
it. You don't have to do it on your own. Kelly, this has been
Mhm.
delightful. How can people find you?
Yeah, I have a website, kellyworrell.com. So there's some of my writing there and some of my speaking ministry are there and just more about me. Or my email is kelly.worrell@moody.edu. Happy to hear from people.
Well, that is very generous and kind of you, Kelly. Thank you so much for being on today's show.
Thank you for having me.
And I'd like to thank my behind the scenes team at Moody Radio, my producer, Karen Hendren, my associate producer, Lisa Jemke, and my engineer, Merle St. James. To hear today's program again, you'll find it at livingbyfaithradio.org or on the Moody Radio app. You may also connect with us through Facebook and Instagram at Living by Faith. Living by Faith is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Bible Institute.